generated hundreds and hundreds of serious fraud complaints from individual Americans, mostly Republicans, including a lot of elderly Americans and Americans with disabilities who say they've been robbed blind, hoodwinked by WinRed, in many cases fleeced out of their life savings. But the Republican chairs of our three committees have repeatedly refused to conduct any oversight or investigation into the WinRed platform that processes donations for over 7,800 GOP campaigns and committees across the United States, including all the GOP senators and 97% of GOP House members. Well, that's just not a serious approach to the problem. This hearing is really part of a political vengeance and vendetta campaign that yesterday came to the House Judiciary Committee in the form of a 4-hour hearing interrogating the president of the Southern Poverty Law Center. After the 2020 election, banks and credit card issuers estimated that WinRed fraud cases constituted as much as 3% of their total national fraud workload across all transactions. That is a shockingly large share, given that there are 150 million credit card transactions that American consumers and businesses engage in every single day in the country. Between January 2022 and June 2024, the FTC received more than 800 complaints about WinRed, nearly 7 times the number it got about ActBlue. In the final months of 2020 alone, the Trump campaign, RNC, and their shared accounts had to issue more than 530,000 refunds worth more than $64 million. That's more than 11 times the amount that the Biden campaign and the Democratic committees had to refund. And yet, who of the administration and our GOP colleagues focused on exclusively from the beginning ActBlue, the company that primarily processes contributions for Democratic campaigns around the country. Last April, the White House issued a presidential memorandum directing the AG and Treasury to, quote, use all lawful authority to investigate ActBlue, which, according to the White House, facilitated straw or dummy contributions or foreign contributions to political candidates and committees. But as Americans can see each day, every accusation by this administration is an admission, every allegation a confession, every charge a self-indictment. The arraignment of ActBlue is an admission about WinRed's continuing serious fraud against their donors. An Associated Press review of President Trump's political committees found more than 1,600 contributions from unverified donors who lived abroad, had close ties to foreign interests, or failed to disclose basic identifying information. Many of those contributions came through WinRed. AP reported that one Chinese businessman gave $5,000 to Trump through WinRed while listing a La Quinta Inn as his home address. Other contributions came from unnamed donors listing 999 Anonymous Drive as their address. Another series of WinRed contributions listed the donor's address as a vacant building in Washington that turned out to be a defunct funeral home. Where is all of the righteous outrage about these abuses? Where is the mobilization of taxpayer resources to investigate WinRed? Where is Attorney General Ken Paxton, who was impeached by the Texas House of Representatives for bribery, securities fraud, abuse of office, and obstruction of justice? Attorney General Paxton sued ActBlue in April, but his office has ignored complaint after complaint from Texas constituents about the allegations of fraud and abuse related to WinRed. Who were the victims of WinRed that Ken Paxton deliberately ignores? Well, one Texas woman tried to make small one-time contributions to Republican candidates that she supported. WinRed emptied more than $15,000 out of her bank account, including charging her account 29 times in one day. She wrote to Attorney General Paxton that she, quote, didn't realize they were sucking my life savings out of my bank account. He never even wrote her back. And if that's how partisan Republicans treat Republicans, you can imagine how they're going to treat everybody else in the country. You don't want me to discuss these other complainants?
The gentleman's time has expired.
Okay.
The ranking member.
A grandmother's entire savings, one single day. An elderly woman in Texas wanted to make a small campaign donation. She filled out the form, he saw the checkbox, but he didn't notice that the box was pre-checked. And WinRed withdrew money from his account in 29 separate transactions by the end of the day. This was not a hacker attack. It wasn't a bank error. It was the recurring payment system of the Republican Party's official donation platform. And dozens of people in Texas who complained about this situation turned to their Attorney General, Ken Paxton. What did Paxton do? Nothing. But the same Paxton launched a full-fledged legal investigation against the Democratic donation platform ActBlue during the same period, with allegations of foreign donor fraud, while waiting for the complaints of 27 Texans against WinRed. On June 1, 2026, Representatives Jamie Raskin, Robert Garcia, and Joe Morell sent Paxton an official inquiry letter right in the middle of this dual standard. The same week, ActBlue CEO Beamlish Wallace Jones came to testify before Congress and invoked the Fifth Amendment, and a federal judge dismissed Paxton's ActBlue case, finding it politically motivated. This is the moment when the most striking "who watches the watchers" question in the history of U.S. campaign finance is seeking an answer. If you want to see these kinds of facts with this clarity, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Let's return to the stage. Background: the asymmetric control of WinRed and ActBlue. To understand this story, one must first know what the two platforms are. ActBlue is a Democratic donation platform established in 2004. It forms the largest small donor network in the United States. In just the 2024 election cycle, it processed over $3 billion in donations. WinRed is the Republican donation platform established in 2019, basically a mirror of ActBlue, the core fundraising infrastructure for Trump and Republican candidates. Both platforms offer recurring payment options. Both platforms have faced controversy. But the essence of Raskin's letter was this: oversight is not being applied equally. Trump signed a presidential memorandum targeting ActBlue in April 2025. Republicans threatened ActBlue's CEO with a congressional contempt citation, and Texas Attorney General Paxton sued ActBlue. But what about the 27 complaints about WinRed in Texas during the same period? No response from Paxton's office. Raskin summarized this asymmetry in a single sentence: while doing nothing to investigate dozens of complaints about WinRed, you launched an investigation into ActBlue, an unrelated organization that processes donations for Democratic candidates. 29 times in one day, the real stories of the victims. The letter Raskin, Garcia, and Morell sent to Paxton was not just an abstract legal argument. It contained concrete victim stories. A donor reported that after agreeing to make a small one-time donation, more than $5,000 was withdrawn from their bank account. Another elderly Texan was hit with $1,000 in unauthorized charges. Think of these numbers in context. $5,000 is a significant portion of annual savings for many Americans. $1,000 is a life-changing amount for a retired Texan, and the common thread among these people is this: they all wanted to make a small donation. In Texas, it was reported that unauthorized withdrawals occurred from users' accounts due to pre-checked recurring payment boxes, and the victims subsequently applied to the office of a Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, but no response was received from the office regarding these applications. WinRed's pre-check method is not technically illegal, but placing this checkbox in a way that the user cannot clearly notice raises serious questions from the perspective of consumer protection law. And the person responsible for asking these questions was the Attorney General in Texas.
Mostly Republicans,
Paxton's discovery
including
timeline, a document of political motivation. The strongest claim in Raskin's letter was about why Paxton initiated the ActBlue investigation. Paxton is the GOP Senate candidate from Texas. Democratic rival Talarico announced a major fundraising haul, and the very next day after this announcement, Paxton's office officially activated the investigation into ActBlue. A federal judge pointed this out exactly in his decision. The timing of the events alone clearly reveals the underlying motivation of Paxton. The investigation into ActBlue had been dormant for more than a year and a half. The day after Talarico disclosed the donation amount, investigators from the Attorney General's office began making a few test donations to ActBlue using gift cards. This chronology is extremely important. The investigation remained inactive for a year and a half. The rival disclosed the donation amount. The next day, the investigation was activated. This was the clearest evidence of political motivation, and a federal judge in Massachusetts halted the case when he saw that motivation. The judge ruled that Paxton had filed the lawsuit for political purposes.
is a
and ordered
shockingly
Paxton
large
to drop
share,
the case.
given that there
ActBlue
are
CEO
150
invokes the
million
Fifth Amendment.
credit card
This
transactions
decision
that American
created an
consumers
immediate stir
and
in the
businesses
political
engage
world.
in every
The
single day in the
CEO of a
country.
donation
Between
platform
January
was announcing
2022
that he
and
would
June
not testify
2024,
before Congress.
the FTC
But it's
received
impossible
more
to
than
evaluate this decision
800
without knowing the
complaints
context.
about WinRed.
Wallace
Nearly
Jones was under
7
pressure
times
after a
the
story
number
given
it
to the
got
New York
about
Times.
ActBlue.
The story reported
In the
that
final
an
months of
outside legal
2020
advisor
alone,
retained by
the Trump
ActBlue
campaign,
had
RNC,
expressed
and
the
their shared
view that
accounts
Wallace
had to
Jones
issue
may have
more
given
than
potentially misleading answers to
530,000
Republicans.
refunds
Wallace Jones,
worth more
hours
than
before the hearing,
$64 million.
wrote an article in the Washington
That's
Post
more than
and
11
said,
times
if
the amount
lawmakers want
that
to
the
discuss
Biden
legislation
campaign
on federal
and the
issues
Democratic
related to
committees had to
campaign
refund.
contributions,
And
they
yet,
should also
who
question
of
the
the
head of
administration
WinRed.
and our
This
GOP
sentence
colleagues focused
encapsulated
on
the essence of the double
exclusively
standard at the hearing in a
from the
single
beginning,
paragraph.
ActBlue,
While the
the
ActBlue
company
CEO
that
invoked the Fifth
primarily
Amendment, the
processes
WinRed
contributions
CEO
for
wasn't even
Democratic
called before
campaigns around the
Congress.
country.
Not
Last
a
April, the
serious
White House
process,
issued a presidential
Morell's
memorandum
finding.
directing
Throughout
the
the
AG
hearing,
and
Democrats
Treasury
consistently
to, quote, use
highlighted the
all
asymmetric
lawful
framework
authority
set by
to
Republicans.
investigate ActBlue,
Morell said, everyone
which, according
knows
to the
that
White
a
House,
fake donation prevention
facilitated
hearing in
straw
Washington
or dummy
today that doesn't look at
contributions or
WinRed
foreign
is not a
contributions to
serious
political
process.
candidates
This
and
observation
committees.
summarized
But
the
as
entire
Americans can
logic
see
of the
each
trial.
day,
While
every
Republicans were blaming
accusation
ActBlue
by
for the
this
fake donation
administration
issue,
is an
they were
admission.
ignoring similar
Every
or even more
allegation,
serious problems
a
on their own
confession.
platforms.
Every charge,
Morell also
a
introduced a motion to
self-indictment.
subpoena Paxton.
The arraignment of
The proposal's
ActBlue
rejection by the
is an
committee with a
admission
5-3 vote
about
along party
WinRed's
lines was
continuing
seen as making the
serious
political
fraud
aspect of the
against
process
their
more
donors.
visible.
An
With the
Associated
Republican
Press
majority
review of
blocking
President
an
Trump's
investigation
political
into their
committees
own
found more than
actions, while the Democrats continued to
1,600
push for an examination
contributions
of
from
the other side's
unverified donors
practices.
who lived abroad,
Raskin's
had
political
close ties to
revenge framework.
foreign interests,
Raskin
or failed to
clearly
disclose
stated that this
basic
trial was part of a
identifying
larger pattern.
information. Many of those
Raskin
contributions
said the trial was
came
part of a
through
political
WinRed.
vendetta and
AP
personal
reported that
animus
one
campaign
Chinese
that has
businessman
also played
gave
out in the House
$5,000
Judiciary
to Trump
Committee.
through WinRed
This
while
framing took the
listing a La
WinRed
Quinta
ActBlue debate
Inn
out of an
as his home
isolated
address.
donation discussion
Other
and
contributions
tied it
came
to a
from
much
unnamed
larger
donors
pattern,
listing
the instrumentalization of
999
institutions
anonymous
and legal
drive
processes
as
for
their
political
address.
purposes.
Another series of WinRed
SPLC
contributions
trial,
listed the
ActBlue
donor's address
investigation,
as a vacant
sending a
building in
federal
Washington
prosecutor to
that
California
turned out
elections.
to be a defunct
All of these are
funeral
moves
home.
implemented by the same
Where
institutional
is
network
all
at the
of
same
the
time.
righteous outrage about
Raskin's
these
assessment
abuses?
was these are
Where
not
is the
independent legal
mobilization
processes.
of
These are a
taxpayer
coordinated
resources
political
to
strategy.
investigate
Paxton's
WinRed?
Senate candidacy.
Where is Attorney General
the
Ken
crystallization of a
Paxton,
conflict of interest.
who was impeached by
Perhaps the most
Texas
striking
House of
aspect of the
Representatives
story was that
for
Paxton
bribery,
himself was an actor in the
securities
electoral
fraud,
race.
abuse
Paxton
of office
became the
and
Republican
obstruction of
Senate
justice.
candidate by defeating
Attorney
former
General
Senator
Paxton
John Cornyn in
sued
Texas in
ActBlue
April
2026,
2026.
but his office has
This is an
ignored
extremely
complaint
important
after
detail.
complaint from
Paxton
Texas
is both the
constituents
Texas Attorney
about
General
the
and a
allegations
Senate
of fraud and
candidate at the
abuse
same time.
related
The
to
lawsuit he filed against
WinRed.
ActBlue targets
Who
the
were
platform
the
where
victims
his
of
Democratic
WinRed
opponent
that Ken
raises
Paxton
funds.
deliberately
It was
ignores?
stated that the investigation
Well,
into
one
complaints against
Texas woman
WinRed was
tried to
rejected,
make
and a conflict of interest
small
discussion
one-time
arose over the claim
contributions
that
to
the
Republican
platform was
candidates
also
that
used as
she
a donation
supported.
channel in
WinRed
Ken Paxton's
emptied
own election
more than
campaign, leading a federal judge to halt the process,
out of her bank
considering
account,
this
including
situation.
charging her
The
account
essence of the questions in
29
Raskin's
times
letter
in
was
one
this.
day.
Can an
She
attorney
wrote to
general
Attorney
protect
General
a
Paxton
platform
that
that
she,
supports
quote,
their own election
didn't
campaign
realize they were
while also
sucking
investigating
my
their
life
opponent's platform?
savings out of my
Paxton's
bank
response
account.
to this letter
He
was
never
not
even wrote her
shared with the
back.
public, but the
If
federal
that's
judge's
how
ruling
partisan
confirmed how
Republicans treat
justified the questions
Republicans,
were.
you can imagine how they're going to
Conclusion,
treat
justice
everybody
for whom?
else.
The
in the
overall
country.
picture that emerges from this
You
story
don't want
can
me
be
to discuss
reduced
these
to a
other,
single question.
complainants?
Is consumer protection and election law enforcement applied with
the
political
ranking
neutrality?
member
27 complaints in Texas, elderly citizens who had thousands of dollars withdrawn from their accounts, applications to Paxton, no response. At the same time, the ActBlue investigation was activated the day after the Democratic rivals' fundraising numbers were released. A federal judge described this pattern as political motivation and dismissed the case. Raskin's investigation recorded this pattern and requested documents from Paxton. Morell summoned the WinRed CEO for testimony. The Republican majority blocked the move with a 5-3 vote. The table is as follows. The CEO of ActBlue is invoking the Fifth Amendment. The WinRed CEO is not called at all. Paxton ignores complaints about his own platform, and the same Paxton is suing the rival's platform. Raskin called this picture a political vendetta campaign. A federal judge called it political motivation, and 27 Texas complainants are still waiting for answers. If you want to follow this type of analysis, subscribe and don't forget to turn on notifications. See you in the next analysis.